Hello, and welcome to episode 10 of the God Cells podcast. I'm Eric Marola. Today is April 21, 2020, day 33 for California's stay-at-home order, where I am located. I have no guests today. I just want to share a few things with you in relationship to COVID-19 and fetal stem cell therapy. While MCell has been temporarily closed due to COVID-19, their scientists have been in the lab working on new protocols to their therapy, further targeting the immune system, lungs, and cardiovascular system, given the onset of our new COVID-19 reality. I will get into more detail on this in a few minutes. Before I get into COVID-19 and fetal stem cells, I have an interesting update about the once semi-legitimate, now fake fetal stem cell clinic located in Tijuana, Mexico, called Stem Cell of America. During my 3-year journey making the God Cells, I had followed Stem Cell of America for about 18 months first, before venturing off to MCell. Mainly because Stem Cell of America, their office was in Malibu, only a short drive from me, and their location where they administer the injections is right across the border in Tijuana, Mexico. For those who don't know, I had contacted many patients who had previously been treated by Stem Cell of America for various ailments, with the vast majority of them having good results, piquing my initial interest in this therapy. And I showed their stories in the God Cells. However, after I made more than a dozen trips to Mexico between 2014 and 2015, filming their new patients or returning patients, virtually none of them showed any positive responses. I also received their injections in 2015, and I didn't notice any difference in myself whatsoever. All along, the founder of Stem Cell of America told me that he had discovered fetal stem cells from MCell, but refused to elaborate or give any details. And each time I asked, the story changed. But it wasn't until MCell allowed me into their world in 2016 did I fully realize the story and understand why he was so elusive about this story. You see, back in the 1990s, Stem Cell of America's founder, William Rader, was one of America's most famous TV doctors, sort of the Dr. Oz of his time. He appeared on Merv Griffin back in the day, and later went on to host a bunch of weekly specials for ABC in New York and Los Angeles, often focused on weight loss and addiction. He had apparently heard about fetal stem cells being practiced in Ukraine at MCell, and used his sort of celebrity status to woo the original founders of MCell into letting him into their world. He had traveled to MCell more than a dozen times over the course of a year or so back in the 90s, gained their trust, and eventually convinced them to give him a batch of liver and brain cells, under the idea of partnering with MCell to open another clinic in another country. Again, this was back in the 1990s when MCell was essentially working out of a one room in a state hospital. William Rader then took the cells that MCell gave him and was never heard from again. So this organization, Stem Cell of America, had set up shop first in the Bahamas after running off with a batch of cells, before getting kicked out of the Bahamas, since it wasn't legal there, and then they went on to set up shop in the Dominican Republic, until getting kicked out of the Dominican Republic for the same reasons. This company then finally ended up in Tijuana, which is essentially the Wild West where anything pretty much goes, but is, of course, also very much illegal in Tijuana, Mexico as well. I had spent countless hours with William Rader. I spent more time with him than some of his own employees, and especially more time with him than his patients had. William Rader had revealed to me that he was running out of fetal stem cells back in 2015, and he was trying to replicate them on his own. Now, at this time, I didn't know he had simply stolen a batch of cells from MCell 20 years prior. I had initially believed the narrative that he got the cells from MCell or somewhere in Eastern Europe, but MCell was certainly brought up many times. But his supply chain was cut off, which was true. How he was using the same batch of stolen cells he acquired 20 years ago, you might ask? Well, because these cells can theoretically be stored within their suspensions for 200 years. It's not recommended, but it is possible. Here's the reason his patients prior to 2014 and 2015 reported good results. Because he still had good fetal stem cells. Once he started running out of cells, he was forced to use less and less until he tried to replicate them on his own. He replicated them on his own in his house in Malibu. not using the required $1 million plus equipment needed to replicate them, and the trained team of lab techs required to oversee the operation, but instead purchasing these solutions meant for such equipment and trying to grow these cells using, in his words, the flask method, where he would use flasks in his house in Malibu to try to grow the cells since he had no supply chain to get more. So not only was he charging the outrageous price tag of $30,000 per treatment, which consisted of 2 injections, one of the brain cells, one of the liver cells, he was doing this with fetal stem cells that he stole and he never paid a dime for. And then, not surprisingly, after trying to replicate these cells on his own in his house in Malibu, in April of 2016, a batch of cells were contaminated and several patients got sick after the injections. Some ended up in the hospital. And nothing has been the same since for Stem Cell of America. So why am I talking about all of this now? Well, William Rader, he died. He died earlier in 2020. There has been no obituary. And I've even had sources tell me, and I quote, Stem Cell of America is hiding that Rader is dead, meaning they are pretending that he is still alive. His Wikipedia page also has him as still alive, months later. So who is running the show there is anyone's guess. But more importantly, what are they injecting people with is even more of a mystery. Incredibly, Stem Cell of America is still accepting new patients. And even more incredibly, I am still filing copyright violation claims against Stem Cell of America for illegally using a re-edited version of The God Cells, my documentary, to serve as a commercial for them. They just cut out the M-cell part, they cut out the opening, they cut out the part my name is on it, they cut out anything that has nothing to do with Stem Cell of America. And they email it to people directly with a password-protected link because they can't obviously put it on YouTube or Vimeo or put it publicly because I will find it. But no, what happens is people email them and they go, hey, dude, this is your movie. I just got this email and the password-protected link, and yep, it still happens. So anyway, the saga of Stem Cell of America is another documentary in and of itself. I might even create a little mini documentary of this entire Stem Cell of America subject in the near future. And you also might be wondering why I didn't put all of this in the movie. Well, the reason is because Rader was still alive. And his attorney was Robert Shapiro, O.J. Simpson's attorney. So if I was going to tell the truth about him while he was still alive, blowing this completely wide open all by myself without any mainstream press or anything behind me, I would have probably been faced with all sorts of gag order attempts on behalf of Robert Shapiro's office, etc. I've even spoken to Robert Shapiro, and he fully believed Rader. He was a big believer in what Rader was doing because Rader was just a really, really, really good confidence man. Con man, that's where the term comes from. He was good because his medical degree wasn't in medicine. He never was a practicing doctor. He was a psychiatrist. And you have to understand the psychiatry and psychological natures of people in order to con them. So there it is. Moving on. It's important to understand the key details about fetal stem cell therapy and its existence overall. Ukraine is simply the only country on earth where this is legal. Ukraine is not a part of the European Union and not a part of Russia. They are an independent sovereign nation where fetal stem cell is legal on the books in cooperation with the Ukraine Ministry of Health. Harvesting abortions to obtain fetal stem cells is expensive and a lengthy process that requires expertise and the right laboratory environment. In other words, not just anybody can do this. MCell paved the way for the legality of fetal stem cells, which also allowed other competing organizations within Ukraine to also exist. The problem with the other clinics in Ukraine is none of them are harvesting the cells. They are buying them on the black market or getting them from questionable and dubious sources. So often I get accused of exclusively promoting MCell. Call it what you wish, but when you have only one organization on planet Earth that is performing the harvesting, sorting, and testing of fetal stem cells and administering them in a clinical setting to people, and I personally am doing an ongoing investigation documenting fetal stem cell therapy, following patients, etc., well, there is no true competition, and therefore all of my attention on the subject is going to be paid to MCell. The moment a competing organization pops up that is doing what they are doing, you can rest assured that I will know about it and I will be there to cover it and continue to follow the world of fetal stem cells. And if they're not doing it above board, as in the case of Stem Cell of America, you can rest assured I will be there to figure that out too. Before I take a deep dive into fetal stem cell therapy and COVID-19, most of you know this, but I want to remind you again the origins of this therapy and the very first patient that was ever treated by M-Cell. Their first patient was a child who was living off of blood transfusions, waiting on a bone marrow transplant, suffering from aplastic anemia or bone marrow failure. He had bone marrow failure because his parents had mistakenly bought milk from a milk farm that had been radiated by Chernobyl. The two lead scientists who invented fetal stem cell therapy found this child, got permission from the parents to inject this child with 2 rounds of fetal liver cells injected into the bloodstream twice, once and then again 2 weeks later. This cured this child of bone marrow failure by injecting the fetal liver cells. Why fetal liver cells? At the time of gestation, 7 to 12 weeks, the liver cells are the foundational building blocks of the body's immune system or bone marrow, the body's bone marrow, the pre-mesenchymal cells and the mesenchymal cells. You will hear this term again later. I just want to point out the importance of the fetal liver cells being the foundation of the body's bone marrow, and with the proof being the very first patient they treated, curing a person of bone marrow failure. So just keep all that in mind. That's what gave them their start. When you hear more about the body's immune system, the mesenchymal cells, and everything I discuss in a minute. During our stay-at-home lockdown, I decided to ask M-Cell's scientists and doctors about fetal stem cell therapy and COVID-19. And I was delighted to hear that they are working on new protocols to address this virus. Since they never actually treated a COVID-19 patient, they cannot say for sure how this therapy would protect the patient from its symptoms, but there is plenty of evidence that I can also speak for personally that show that this therapy boosts the immune system tremendously, where, say, if you contracted COVID-19, perhaps maybe within a year or less after receiving fetal stem cell therapy, it could greatly reduce the risk of the deadly effects of COVID-19. As we know, the people who die from COVID-19 are those who have compromised immune systems and or are simply much older in age, as older populations generally don't have as strong an immune system as younger populations. There are also increased reports of how COVID-19 is also causing strokes and heart attacks at a much higher rate than pre-COVID-19 society. When receiving fetal stem cell therapy at M-Cell, you are given more than a dozen different human organ cells. One of the most potent for the immune system being the fetal liver cells, as I mentioned earlier. The fetal liver cells at the time of gestation and harvest, 7 to 12 weeks, are the precursors, the building blocks of the bone marrow of the human body, and thus the foundation of our entire immune system. Here's a quick anecdotal story about myself and this therapy. About 2 months after returning home from my annual fetal stem cell therapy at M-Cell in 2017, I was home for a couple of months, and then I started walking around for about 3 weeks with a mild sore throat. I was so busy at the time, as I always am, and I kept living with this sort of mild, annoying sore throat until I literally spontaneously took a short walk in my neighborhood to an urgent care that's a few blocks from me to see if this was anything to worry about. I got my throat swabbed. They came back a little while later and said, "You have strep throat." So I was walking around with strep throat for 3 weeks without any fever, no swollen lymph nodes, or any of the usual symptoms, including a big, fat, painful sore throat. I was walking around with strep for 3 weeks and did not know it. I can only attribute this to the cells. The doctor was totally amazed and confused that I had been walking around living a normal, productive life with strep for 3 weeks. I did tell him about fetal stem cells, and he was actually fairly receptive, but that's a whole nother story. On top of that, since I started having fetal stem cell therapy annually, I have also never caught so much as a cold, not counting a flu, since 2016. While everyone else is dealing with their seasonal colds and flus, I have not had to since 2016. So I want to dive deeper into the immune-boosting efficacy of fetal stem cells and how they could protect you against COVID-19 or any similar viral infection. Reading directly from a response from MCell's lead scientists and doctors regarding COVID-19, they said, "We haven't treated an actual COVID-19 patient, so we don't have certain proof fetal stem cells could protect the infected patient from the life-threatening symptoms of COVID-19. But we can say that we know it helps boost the immune system. We've recently developed a special component to additionally boost the immune system. The goal is a deep immune modulatory action on T cells and B cells by means of fetal stem cells. T cells are lymphocyte immune cells that protect the body from pathogens. T cells originate in the bone marrow. They are important for cell-mediated immunity and the activation of immune cells to fight infection. B cells are a type of white blood cell that function as a component of the immune system by secreting antibodies. Antibodies, of course, are proteins produced by plasma to neutralize bacteria and viruses, as well as the immune modulatory action of macrophages. A macrophage is a large white blood cell that is an important part of our immune system. A macrophage has the ability to locate and eat particles, such as bacteria, viruses, funguses, and parasites. Macrophages are born from the white blood cells called monocytes, which are produced by stem cells in our bone marrow. They said, "We have numerous observations proving that fetal stem cells can reprogram the immune system by increasing tolerability and defense levels of the human organism, protecting it from diseases, viral and bacterial infections, allergic and autoimmune reactions. In addition, fetal stem cells contribute to allowing quick identifications of foreign agents, resulting in its destruction and damage of the infected cell, as well as stimulating development of high reactive antibodies. Thus, fetal stem cell therapy promotes the following. First, by increasing the number of macrophages, which again are large white blood cells, and monocytes. Monocytes are a type of white blood cell that fights off bacteria, viruses, and fungi. Monocytes are the biggest type of white blood cell in the immune system. Originally formed in the bone marrow, they are released into our blood and tissues. When certain germs enter the body, these monocytes quickly rush to the site and attack them. To understand the difference between monocytes and macrophages, monocytes circulate through the blood for a few days before migrating into the tissues, when they later become macrophages. So monocytes are the precursors to macrophages. So increasing the number of monocytes and macrophages favors intense phagocytosis. Phagocytosis, which means simply eliminating foreign microorganisms like viruses. Did you get that? Second, stimulating the work of satellite cells, like mast cells found in connective tissues that protects from inflammation and allergic reactions, and basophils, another type of white blood cell. While also produced in the bone marrow, they're found in many other tissues throughout our bodies. They're a big player in our immune system. Another big player in our immune system, eosinophils, which is another type of disease-fighting white blood cell, and platelets, which are tiny blood cells that protect the body from clots and to help stop bleeding, etc., all within the connective tissues and mucous membranes, the mucous membranes being especially important in a COVID-19 infection. These all participate in the regulation of an inflammatory reaction. These cells create an intense secretion of various biomedical mediators which participate in the protection against large multicellular invaders such as a virus. Third, they enhance the activity of our body's natural killers, or leukocytes, which also counteract foreign substances and disease, and our lymphocytes, another killer white blood cell. Fourth, fetal stem cells increase the effectiveness of cellular immunity by increasing the T and B lymphocytes. Fifth, this is the best to me. Fetal stem cells improve immunological memory. I find it so fascinating, which means that fetal stem cells contribute to the immune system's ability to react quicker and more effectively to pathogens. So, like all organisms' ability to get smarter, fetal stem cells allows your immune system to not only become more robust, but also get better at outsmarting foreign pathogens as time goes on. So it's like taking your immune system to the gym. In addition to their personalized protocol for each new patient, that's going on, that exists today. Given the onset of COVID-19, special attention will be made towards the administration of fetal lung and respiratory cells, as well as the cardiac or cardiovascular cells to protect the patient, not only potential lung damage, but also cardiovascular disease and damage that can rise from this virus. Fetal stem cells regenerate, and as we get older, or heaven forbid, we contract this virus, it all causes degeneration. Fetal stem cells simply fight against all of that by regenerating. That is their job. Now, if you go ahead and Google COVID-19 stem cells, there is a plethora of reports of various entities using mesenchymal stem cells to fight the COVID-19 infection. Where do mesenchymal stem cells come from? Generally, the bone marrow. The FDA just approved a clinical trial to treat COVID-19 using placental cells, which is far inferior of a method than fetal stem cells. But it just goes to show that even the mainstream is seeing the value in this. There are also new reports of possibly expanding the use of umbilical cord stem cells to fight COVID-19. Both placental and umbilical, they're just mesenchymal cells harvested at 9 months. That's all they are. Properly harvested fetal stem cells are taken during the end of the first trimester, 7 to 12 weeks of gestation, not 9 months, and they consist of a much wider array of human organ building blocks other than the very important mesenchymal cells. With fetal, you are getting the most powerful forms of all of these cells being used today to treat COVID-19. And of course, the only reason it's not being used anywhere but Ukraine is the political pressure of its origins coming from voluntary abortions, nothing else. The USA can get away with placental and umbilical because it's going to be thrown away anyway. Of course, so is an aborted fetus, but the fact that they're using placental and umbilical stem cells only further supports the evidence that harvesting the cells early in the human gestation process is by far more effective than using only the adult bone marrow mesenchymal cells that are as old and damaged as the adult they are taken from, processed, and given back to. Also, new reports are coming out that those who have had COVID-19 and recovered, some are suffering from longer-term lung and heart damage. And with the proper administration of fetal lung and heart cells, this therapy can also help those people as well. Of course, none of this helps us while we are all sitting locked in our homes and unable to travel to the Ukraine. But I can tell you that the moment the borders open up, I will be back to MCell getting my annual therapy. I know it's not a cheap therapy, particularly in a time of economic uncertainty. Harvesting, sorting, testing, and suspending these fetal stem cells, not to mention furthering the research to expand upon their regenerative capabilities, is a further more expensive process. But if you can afford it, I cannot think of anything else I would recommend more outside of a basic healthy lifestyle. Receiving fetal stem cell therapy really is like cheating Mother Nature. Given the advances that has occurred at MCell since I started documenting their work several years ago, and given the COVID-19 outbreak, my sequel to The God Cells will cover a wide variety of ailments, not exclusively focusing on type 2 diabetes or male infertility only as I had originally set out to do. I will include at the least everything from autism, spinal injections of the neuronal fetal cells for Parkinson's, MS, and other neurological ailments. As always, if you watch my documentary on this subject or just listen to this podcast and want to investigate this therapy for yourself, it's not a bother for me to communicate with you. If you have any questions. I was just like you walking into this confusing jungle of stem cells. Not to mention fetal stem cells. And I'm happy to share with anyone my experience to answer questions about it or to place you in touch with another person or family who has already been there. If we can just get the borders opened up again, anyone who wants to join me at MCell in Kyiv, Ukraine, while I'm also there this year, you are more than welcome to join me. Who knows? You might end up being in my next documentary. I had planned to be there in April, May, and June of this year to get my own annual therapy and to film several patients for my new documentary. But our best guess is the earliest things would open up for international travel is maybe July? If you're on my mailing list or follow the God Cells Facebook page, you will be some of the first to be notified of my next trips there. For those not on my mailing list and you want to be on it, just go to stemcellsmovie.com or ericmerola.com. That's ERICMEROLA.com and sign up. Both websites go to the same mailing list. I send an email maybe once a month on average. Outside of my work following stem cells, I am finishing up my 5th documentary and my first non-medical documentary, which I had scheduled, ready, to present in front of the European Parliament before the COVID-19 virus hit. I cannot reveal any more details about this film right now, but I can tell you that it involves a huge, previously unearthed political and economic scandal involving multiple countries, including the United States. On top of that, there's another exciting development in my life encompassing all of my work of the past 10 years as a documentary filmmaker in the world of medicine. And I think everyone will be very surprised to learn about what this is. I promise to inform you once everything is finalized. All I can say for now is that Hollywood is knocked on my door. That's all I'm going to say. So that's it. Stay safe, stay healthy. And I hope to see us on the other side of this COVID-19 pandemic. And as always, if you want to go to MCell or you know someone who does, email me. To be honest, I would rather communicate and assist someone from the beginning of this process versus having to fix the inevitable multiple mistakes that many people make going about organizing this journey to Kyiv, Ukraine on their own. It's not a bother for me. This movie and this therapy is still very unknown to the world, and I do not get as many emails as you would think. So, I have made 15 trips to Ukraine, to MCell in the Ukraine since 2016. I know exactly what to do, what not to do. Just ask me. So if you have any further questions about what I talked about today, especially involving this therapy and COVID-19, etc., I'm still learning more as well. But email me. I'm always open, and I don't have as much going on like the rest of us sitting at home in lockdown. So my email is eric@ericmerola.com. That's ERIC@ERICMEROLA.com. Goodbye for now. Stay safe and stay healthy. And I'll see you next time in episode 11 of the God Cells podcast. I'm Eric Merola.